14. I believe we'll get through this morning, finish this up, and it'll be on to chapter 14, which, as far as I know, has one of the unique events in all of history, especially what's recorded in the Bible, and that's the angels preaching the gospel. So, right, so last week John gave us a little more in-depth look into the Antichrist. And this week we're going to take a look at the third member of the, I guess we would call it the unholy. And this is about the only place I'll use the term Trinity, but the unholy Trinity of Satan, his son, and the false prophet. Well, let's begin with verse 11 this morning. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So we've come across John using the term another several times throughout this study, so we know when he's using that term, he's another of the same kind or another of the like kind. And while this beast, the second beast, shares similarities with the first beast, he is different. And we know the first beast came up out of the sea, and John describes the second beast here as coming up out of the earth. Now, the first beast was subservient. He served the dragon, which we know that is Satan. This second beast is going to be subservient to the first beast. He is here to serve him and draw people's attention to the Antichrist. Actually, we'll see a little bit later here, his job, his role here on earth is to cause people to worship the Antichrist. Now, the first beast, the Bible tells us, in many ways looked like the dragon. He also spoke like the dragon. This second beast, John tells us, he's kind of going to look like a lamb. Mild, meek-mannered, little pacifist kind of person. But that's only in looks, because he's going to speak, John tells us, just like the first beast. Blasphemies and anti-God hatred and anything that's to do away with or to contradict the gospel message. Now, many believe that this beast coming up out of the earth and having the appearance looking like a lamb is somehow, some way, he's going to rise up out of some sort of a religious institution. I believe he's going to be a religious figure that the whole world is going to know who he is. And we'll have to see how that works out when that time gets here. Now, John describes him as having two horns. Now, this might mean that he has authority over two areas of the realm here on earth. That probably, we're sure one of them would be religion. Another one very likely may be politics. Or the two horns may simply, without applying any sort of symbolic meaning to them, it may simply be John's way of saying, he's going to look like a lamb. Often, that's the most frequently used title for Jesus. And remember, Satan cannot create anything. All thing he can do is mimic. And so this false prophet appearing or looking like a lamb may be Satan's way of trying to mimic or imitate the Holy Spirit. But he's going to speak, John says, like the dragon and the first beast. Now, coming from a world-renowned, and I believe a famous, well-known religious leader, and we'll get in towards the end of the message this morning. I'll tell you my speculation. The Bible doesn't say who, but I'll give you my speculation on who I think it is. He's going to be a religious leader, but if he speaks like the dragon and the Antichrist, the only thing that's going to come out of his mouth is blasphemy towards God, God hatred, and contradiction to the gospel message of Christ. So from here through the rest of the book of Revelation, chapter 16, verse 13, chapter 19, verse 20, and chapter 20, verse 10, John uses that term to identify this person. This is the false prophet. So what we have here with the introduction to this third person is Satan imitating God in every way possible. He has assumed a position of being the Father. The Antichrist is a representative of his Son, and this false prophet is to be the Holy Spirit of this unholy Trinity. So you can see where this is headed. The religion here on earth, the one world religion, once the Antichrist takes over and this false prophet is given the authority to run this one world religion, there's nothing the world should expect to come from them except lies and deception. They're not going to ever once hear anything close to the gospel message. And I'm going to tell you, if you look at who's heading up this world famous religious organization today, whenever he gives a speech, it never has anything to do with religion or morality. He talks socialism, he talks anti-America, he talks a lot of things political, but he never talks anything about morality or the gospel or salvation or God's love for us as a people. Look now, we're going to look and see what this false prophet's job is, how Satan, the Antichrist, is going to use him. We got a sort of lengthy passage we want to read. Takes us down almost to the end of this chapter, verse 12 down through verse 17. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword, and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. So John tells us that as soon as this false prophet comes up on the scene, from the Antichrist and from the dragon, he's going to be given all authority. And I believe this is over the religious realm. Remember, this all gets boiled down into a one world religion. It's the only religion that'll be allowed on the planet by the Antichrist. And from the Antichrist, from the first beast, John tells us he's given great authority and power. So he's going to be the world's worship leader. He's just not going to worship anything good. And a little phrase in here caught my attention, made me kind of think, because it uses language that says, in his presence. Is a false prophet going to have to continually be close, nearby to the Antichrist? Is he going to have to follow him around wherever he goes, to be there with him constantly? I don't know. A little bit of a phrase there caught my attention. But his job, John is clear about it, is to cause the whole earth to worship the Antichrist. Now, the only way this can be done, this Antichrist is going to come on, I believe, as a political figure, a political leader. To get people to worship him is going to require some skillful lies and deception on the part of the false prophet. But we know from what John's describing here is that many, if not all, of what's on planet Earth is going to bow down and worship the Antichrist. I believe in large part this has something to do with, maybe a lot to do with, this healing miracle that takes place with the Antichrist, in that he receives a mortal wound to his head and is healed from that. Zechariah chapter 11, verse 17, the prophet, the Old Testament prophet there, tells us about the idle shepherd, the worthless shepherd. He's going to be wounded, and even though he is healed from it, he recovers, he tells us his right arm is going to be thoroughly withered,
Right.
and he's going to lose use of his right eye. But that, I believe, is just one of the miraculous things that this false prophet is going to be able to do. John says he performs, he does many great signs and wonders. And so we're led to believe here the Jews are not the only people that are going to fall for requiring a sign. Many people are going to look at the signs and the wonders that this guy does, and they're going to be deceived by that. Now, we look at people today and we think we're pretty enlightened people. And we wouldn't fall for this business of signs and wonders. Hopefully we've seen enough examples of it throughout history done by false prophets that we'd know better than to put our whole faith and trust in people doing signs and wonders.
That's right.
Exodus chapter 7 through 9, you had Pharaoh's magicians pretty much matching miracle for miracle what Moses and Aaron did by the hand of God. Deuteronomy chapter 13, God warns the people about false prophets doing miracles, and his advice, his instructions was to judge them by their message, not by their works. In Matthew chapter 7, Jesus warned about false prophets that were even claiming that they did miracles in his name, being false prophets. Depart from me, ye workers of iniquity, for I never knew you. And then Matthew chapter 24, we know Jesus warned that many false prophets were going to come during the end times, doing signs and wonders and deceiving many people. Paul warned the Thessalonians not to be deceived by those doing powers, signs. He called them lying wonders. Benny Hinn. How does a guy pack football stadiums full of people by smacking folks across their forehead and them jumping up and hollering, I'm healed, I'm healed? It's all a stage act.
That's right.
He's got those people picked out, rehearsed, but yet, there are many people that believe what they're seeing is a true act of God. If they didn't, they wouldn't be packing. And I'm sure they're paying for tickets to get in there.
Right.
Joyce Meyer, Joel Osteen, T.D. Jakes, a whole lot of, I can't think of the woman, Trump spiritual advisor. I mean, there's a whole slew of them out there. That if we just did what God said, judge them by their message, not by their works, they'd all be exposed as being lying, false prophets.
Yes.
But yet, John tells us that pretty much the whole world is going to be deceived by this guy, by the things that he does. A lot of it is going to be imitating things, calling down fire from heaven. He's imitating things that the two witnesses were doing, imitating things that Elijah was doing.
Right.
He's probably going to do other miracles. John doesn't list them all here, but he's probably going to do miracles that will be representative, imitate things that Jesus did. Healing sick people or things like that. But all that he's going to do is false, fake. It's an imitation of the real miracles of God, but yet it's going to fool, deceive many people. Now here, to me, if this was something that I was going to have to be here for, maybe the scariest part of the whole tribulation period, what Jesus and others have referred to as the abomination of desolation. They create an image of the Antichrist. And if false prophets got power, John says, to give that image breath. And breath equals life. So from an inanimate idol to a living, breathing, I don't know any other word but thing, some supernatural demonic thing. Now here, where I could say I wished I could be specific, but I'm not sure about one or the other. They're either going to take this image that's now alive and place it in the Holy of Holies, in the temple that's rebuilt in Jerusalem. Or in other places, the way it reads to me, it seems that the Antichrist himself goes into the Holy of Holies and demands the worship, declaring himself to be God. But whether it's this duplicate image of the Antichrist or the Antichrist himself, one way or another, they're going to end up in the Holy of Holies in the temple and demanding worship, to be worshiped just like God is worshiped from everybody that's left on the planet. The folks that are here, are you going to be able to tell them apart from one another? I mean, is this image going to look exactly like the Antichrist? I get the picture here that John just says he talks, but I got, my mind tells me he can see, hear, and everything else. He's going to be just like a living, breathing person standing there. And we need not ask, how is it that so many people would fall down and more than fall down and worship this totalitarian dictator? Well, it's happened many times throughout the history of mankind. It ought to be no surprise for it to continue to happen during the tribulation. Stalin killed millions of his own people, yet they put his image up everywhere. Over time, the people were brainwashed into believing and thinking that he was a great leader. The people had no freedom whatsoever to do what they wanted to do. But the 8 o'clock bus was there, 8 o'clock sharp every morning, and garbage pickup never missed a beat. The same thing with Mao. Killed millions of his own people. Anybody that might rise in opposition to him, that did not bow down in submission to him, ended up being dead, and yet they look at him today as being a great leader. We've said it before, talked about it, that Antichrist is going to come on the scene during a very chaotic time, and he's going to have all the answers. And it's going to look like he's beginning to fix things and get things put back in place that they should be. And he takes care of all of, like, the political, geopolitical things. And then this false prophet comes on the scene, and we have the one world religion. Never think that man doesn't want religion. I've been talking to atheists, a few that I've known over the years. I've come to the conclusion it's not that they don't want religion. They just don't want God's religion. Because God's holding us to accountability. And you're going to reach a point in time when you're going to have to come before Him and give an account of your life. And that's the part they don't want. They much would prefer to have a religion that they've created in their own mind that allows them to live and do and whatever they want to do without ever being held responsible for it. Now, what in the world would happen if they make a whole bunch of these images, shrink them down in size, and force everybody to put one in their house? I mean, somehow it knows who's worshiping it and who's not. Do they have a set time every day that you've got to participate in this worship? Is it like Nebuchadnezzar's statue that the music or some signal over the airways goes out, and when that happens, you've got to worship? I don't know. However it's going to be, this thing is going to know who does and who doesn't pay homage to it. And there's only one punishment. If you don't, it will kill you. Everyone today, if the Lord tarries, before we're out of here, I think we're going to see many, many things begin to change in our life and culture before the Lord calls us home. Everybody now has a cell phone. And you need to be aware, if you're not already, the government's trapping every communication you make. Every text message you send, every email you send, every phone call you make. It's all being recorded and stored in these big black buildings that have gone up. First few were in Utah, but all over the country. Now, why would the government be interested in keeping, storing, recording the things that we say and do? Because some point down the line, they're going to use it against us. If there's something, a new law is going to come out, a new tax is going to come out, and especially with the advent of AI now, they can scan those databases in seconds and spit out a report saying exactly who will and who won't submit and cooperate with what they're going to try to do. And we see some of this taking place in the tribulation here. John tells us that the false prophet is going to cause everybody to receive a mark, either in their right hand or in their forehead. And we know again, this is imitating God. We talked earlier how God has sealed those with a mark that belong to Him. Now, we can't see that. We sense it as we talk with folks and get to know them, but we can't. But I believe Satan, the demons, can see it. That's how they know. You got to leave that one alone. You can't. You got to get God's permission if you want to mess with that person. But the devastating thing about this mark is, we're still going to talk about chapter 14. We have angels preaching the gospel. We're still in the first 3.5 years of the tribulation period here. There's still opportunity, time for folks to be saved. But the Bible tells us if you take that mark, you've signed your own death warrant.
Right.
Because you cannot, once that mark is upon you, once you've declared your loyalty, your patronage, your faith to the Antichrist, you cannot be saved. And so that's a done deal. Now, past not being able to be saved, if you don't take that mark, you're not going to be able to buy or sell. You'll be forced out of the economy. Now, we know this cashless society is coming. Very likely we're going to see it before the rapture takes place. Pressure is going to be put upon people to conform to whatever the government is trying to do. They're already talking about taking away the dollar. America wants to go to a cashless society very soon. And they've got the technology in place to do it. It's being phased in now in other countries. I believe China is phasing it in place as we speak here this morning. And we're all familiar with the credit card, and it's got the little chip on it. That tells immediately, used to you could have a credit card and you could fudge on it every now and then if you wanted to, because they had to put it in a little thing and roll the deal over it, and then make a copy of it, and then they have to send that into the bank to get their payment. You can't fudge on it anymore with that chip, because it knows right now
That's right.
how much money you've got in the bank, whether you've got enough to cover the purchase you're trying to make or not. But we're one step closer than the credit card. And even though I know, when the credit card came out and the chip was on it, we're moving towards that cashless society. I still use it because it's still my choice. I choose if I want to use that method of payment or not, if I want to write a check or if I want to give them cash. But the test is in place and it's apparently working very well, and this is one that I won't use. When you go through the checkout line, you just wave your phone over there, and it does it for you. That's getting too close for my comfort, and so Google keeps trying to put that Google Pay on my phone. Every time I turn around, I see that app on there. I delete it, remove it, so it's not even on my phone. But it won't be long. They have it right back on there. But I'm not going to use that. So we've already got the technology in place. Whether it's a chip or whatever it is in a phone that allows that kind of transaction to take place, it'd be no problem whatsoever for them to implant that into your hand or your forehead if you don't have a hand to put that in. And I believe this technology they're going to use somehow is also going to be John here referring to bearing the mark, or some sort of a mark that's going to identify you with accepting this mark, being part of the Antichrist and the false prophet's economy. It says you will bear his name. And boy, as we begin to take a look at this, here's another one of them places in the Bible. This is one of the most debated, speculated topics that there is. And we don't have, it would take a month of Sundays to go through all the possibilities and things that people have come up with. But take a look here in verse 18. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So John says, if you have the wisdom and the ability, you'll be able to calculate. They're going to take some figuring to do. But he gives us a hint here that we know 6 is the number of a man, and the number of the beast here, and if this is all 3 personages of the dragon, the beast, and the second beast, the false prophet, 666. Now I'm going to say Christians, there are way too many of us that bear too much superstition about this number. Christians having conniptions if they go to pick up a license plate to their car and it's got 666 on it, or not buying a house because the street address is 666. But anything that contains that number, it's not necessarily evil, but it is a reference to the name of the beast here. Now, just a couple of examples where people have gone off the path with this. Ronald Wilson Reagan, 6 letters in each one of those names. There were people that claimed he was going to be the Antichrist. Here's a good one. In 2020, if you multiply the text number that Biden gave for donations by the year 2020, you'll get 666. The Roman numerals, if you add all of them up, they add up to 666. And John tells us this is the number of a man. We know 6 is a biblical reference, a biblical number for man. Jesus' name in Greek adds up to 888. So if this is the name of the Antichrist or the name of the dragon, it's going to come up short. Who knows what this name is? I think when the time comes, when somebody becomes a parent, you'll be able to, like John says, look at the name and calculate it. I believe it's just using a system that's been in place since before church age. You're just taking the first letter of the alphabet equals 1, the second letter is 2, the third letter is 3, and so on. I believe when the time comes, like John said, those with wisdom will be able to calculate who it is, and they'll be able to see and know, oh boy, this guy's come on the scene. He's somebody. Look at the things he's saying and doing. And you figure up his name, and you'll probably find out that it comes up to be 666. I think it's pointless now to try to say it's this or it's that. You could take any name under the sun and manipulate the math in it to make it come up with 666, and we've done it. I mean, I'm telling you, there's just book after books after books of people who try to say, oh, I've got this figured out. Here's what 666 is. Now, the few minutes we got left this morning, I told you we'd get around to my speculation of just who this false prophet may be. I believe most likely will be. Without getting into too much detail, I believe the answer to this is in Revelation chapter 17. There's a clue there. Now, if the Roman Empire is going to be restored, does it not make sense that the part of that, the Holy Roman Empire, will be exalted or restored with it? But it talks about the great whore of Babylon. And two things John says there kind of tells me who I believe exactly that is. He talks about the young harlots. Well, who would they be? The Lutherans, the Presbyterians, the Anglicans? They all divided from the Catholic Church and went their own ways, with the exception of one thing. I mean, more than one thing, but one critically important thing: infant baptism. They held strongly onto that, even due to this day. And I believe during the tribulation time, they will reform back to their mother, the whore, because of that one thing. And John tells us that he was amazed, in great wonderment, that great whore was drunk on the blood of the saints. No one throughout history, I hate to tell the Muslim folks, but as mean and bad and cruel as they think they are, they do not hold a candle to the number of Christians that the Catholics have killed. Millions upon millions slaughtered by the Roman Catholic Church. And so much that John described it as being drunk on it. The other thing, they buy and sell in the souls of men. Well, if you don't get baptized as an infant, you can pay a little bit of money and yeah, they may have to go through purgatory or this or that, but you can make sure they get to heaven by just, paying up enough money here to the church, and they'll make sure they end up there. And I tell you, listen to this Pope when he speaks. He never talks about anything spiritual. It's always socialism, communism, America hate speech. And throughout history, some of the popes have been some of the most wicked and evil men that have ever lived. So I'm not saying it's this particular pope. It'll depend on the Lord tarrying, how long he's gone, how long this one stays around. But I do believe that when that one world religion is formed, you understand the word Catholic simply means universal.
Yes.
When that one religion is formed, that universal church is one that's going to be that one world religion, and it will once again take up the job of exterminating Christians. And whoever happens to be Pope at the time is going to come under the influence of Satan and the Antichrist, and he will take up that role gladly of leading the world to worship them. Thanks for being here this morning. Like I said, next week we'll get into chapter 14. We'll see the one time that I'm aware of that angels have the privilege of sharing the gospel with man.